There's a lot of trans people talking about being trans lately. There's also a chorus of where are the trans men in the fucking discourse. Honestly, I'm not sure if I identify as a man or as genderqueer or something right now, but I do identify as trans. Specifically transmasculine because I was assigned female at birth, and I've been on testosterone HRT for the past 6 months for the express purpose of masculinizing my appearance. Being trans is pretty complicated, and there are some unique complications to the transmasculine experience that I'd like to philosophize on. This time I'm going to talk about feminism. That is going to mean talking about femininity and womanhood in relation to the FTM experience, so if that's going to make you uncomfortable, exercise caution. Don't say I didn't warn you. One thing I do not identify as is as a butch woman, but the line between a trans man and a butch woman is honestly pretty blurry right now. The way the line between a trans woman and a crossdresser or a drag queen was blurry 20 or 10 or even 5 years ago. Everyone raise your hand if you experimented with being butch before coming out as a boy. They are definitely not the same thing, but there are overlaps in lived experiences and media depictions between mask-presenting women and early transition trans men that I'm gonna dwell on unnecessarily. Strap in, boys. So, toxic masculinity dictates that if you are a man, you can only do masculine things. Do something too feminine outside of the realm of manhood, and your metaphorical man card is revoked. Why are you wearing nail polish, bro? Why would a man wear nail polish? Attitudes toward feminine presentation are changing, in part because we're having conversations about this. But the fact remains that, by and large, the trend in media is to show the feminization of men as the ultimate humiliation a man can experience. Better media critics than me have explored this trope in detail, especially trans feminine media critics. I'd like to point you toward this Council of Geeks video called The Problem is Patterns. But does that mean that if you're a woman, you can only do feminine things? Well, we've had a few feminist revolutions over the past century, probably about 3, and femininity is not so much a rigid cage from which a good lady never deviates anymore. While our idea of masculinity has remained more or less rigid, femininity continues to expand and to challenge. You can wear pants now, is what I'm saying. Where is that line, though? If a woman or AFAB person wants to present themselves in traditionally masculine ways, like gaining muscle or cutting their hair, does that carry the same level of humiliation? Well, no. This is actually an expression of power. Specifically, masculine power. In media, if a woman character looks like a man, this shows that she is on the men's team. She is one of the guys. She's on the same level as them in terms of physical agency. Innuendo Studios calls this trope the Vasquez, and has a great video on this topic that was the inspiration for this essay. This isn't the only way to show a powerful female character, obviously, but whatever the authorial intent, this masculinized woman narrative in media, for me at least, strikes a chord with the transmasculine experience. Ian was talking about female action heroes in particular. There's a comedy version of this masculinized woman wherein our protagonist must disguise herself as a man for some reason, and gender-bending comedy ensues. This is where you'll find some Shakespearean comedic heroines like Viola from Twelfth Night, or Haruhi from Ouran High School Host Club. This is a whole other topic that I'll have to get into another time, but for now, keep Vasquez on your mind. As Innuendo Studios points out, most of the time this character is introduced as more conventionally feminine, and as the narrative requires from her more agency, more masculine violence, and more audience empathy, she becomes more masculine. She does this not just by adding masculinity like lifting weights or using guns, but by removing femininity, taking off her heels, ripping her long skirt, cutting her long hair. Her gain in power comes just as much from her acceptance of the masculine as it does the rejection of the feminine. I think this subtraction of the feminine is something a lot of trans men and other transmasculine people can relate to, especially the image of cutting off your hair, and the subtraction of other parts of the body. But I think the loss of femininity is clearly felt. Personally, I'm growing out my hair now that I'm on testosterone because I used to hate how feminine long hair made me look. It's only because my face and my voice are perceived as less feminine now that I feel I can allow myself the femininity of having long hair. It's adding and subtracting. Many transmasculine people pursue top surgery because they have dysphoria about their chest. But the first thing someone who hasn't had top surgery will ask someone who has is, what about nipple sensitivity? I don't want to give up having my nipples sucked. You are also, in a lot of situations, not all situations, but a lot, giving up cis privilege to become trans, and giving up womanhood for male privilege. This can be a little hard to wrap your head around. Like, do you really have male privilege if locals aren't seeing you as male? Mia Mulder did a video about passing as a woman recently, where she mentions that she actually used to pass more consistently than she does now. Not because she's been doing anything different with her presentation, but because trans awareness has reached the general public and made trans women easier to recognize. Notice how I say trans women rather than trans people. The trans awareness movement has been favoring trans feminine voices, and with good reason, because trans women face way more violence. Remember, by coming out and presenting as female, they chose a path media told them was humiliating and degrading. By doing the same, we chose a path that media told us would make us powerful. So there is a relative lack in transmasculine voices in the discourse, but by extension, that invisibility means we can escape being clocked for that much longer, and we don't have to try as hard to pass. For example, if the bathroom debate is being framed as men trying to get into women's restrooms, like, what the hell does that mean for us? We seem to have been forgotten or ignored in favor of a trans-misogynist narrative. And that is a function of trans male privilege. By no means the same as cis male privilege, but a privilege nonetheless. I said we don't have to try as hard to pass, and that's still true, but being invisible doesn't necessarily mean it's easier to pass as male. Cis people still can't tell the difference between a trans man and a butch woman a lot of the time. Unless the transmasculine person in question has been transitioning for a long time, has facial hair, a deep voice, no visible breasts, etc., they see a woman who isn't doing femininity. And the work of feminists over the past century has made it pretty easy to say, fuck you. Femininity is restrictive. I don't have to do femininity. You might get dirty glances for refusing to be attractive to straight men, but it's understood that you can do that if you want. But the conversation on how masculinity is also restrictive, and that you don't have to do masculinity, is very new, and therefore more dangerous to challenge. The trans feminine struggle is a complicated problem that involves having to break down the idea that your existence is destroying manhood as a concept. The trans masculine struggle is to be seen as male rather than as a masculine woman. For some reason, men with vaginas aren't seen as a threat to manhood, at least not as much as a woman with a penis somehow. After all, your butch friend isn't like other girls. She's one of the guys. So, let's go back to rejecting the feminine. I didn't realize that I wasn't a girl until about 18 or 19. And I had spent my teens learning level 1 SJW stuff like women are not treated with the same respect as men, are assumed by default to be less qualified than their male peers, and they are offered lower salaries. And seeing this injustice around me, feeling a sense of, what do I do? Everything is just going to be worse for me for no reason. Having that shared injustice with other women was an important part of womanhood for me. Having that realization, noticing that I actually wasn't a girl and didn't want to be, and being reminded that I was a girl was upsetting. I realized that my relationship to feminism was going to have to change. Did not identifying as a girl mean that I couldn't identify with women's causes? In my youth, before learning about trans people, I remember having the thought, I wish I had been born male because things would be easier for me. So I was coming at transition from a perspective where I saw a way to get out of the cage of femininity, but I could only save myself, and I'd be leaving other women behind. Even though I wanted to be seen as androgynous or male by strangers, even if I eventually didn't want to be considered for female acting roles, it doesn't change the fact that I had a female childhood, and a female adolescence, and I was whistled at by a man in a truck when I was 11 years old. I thought about the trading of a cis privilege for a male one, and I decided it wasn't worth it, not yet at least. So I was semi-closeted for the next 4 years. I'd know my gender, but I wouldn't perform it. I'd wear androgynous clothes and have androgynous hair and go by my androgynous initials for my own comfort. Let people call me she and not really know what to do when I'm in an LGBT space and someone asks for my pronouns. And if someone really got to know me, I'd let them in on my little secret. I'd be living as a butch bisexual who was willing to be the only woman in the room. That was a big issue for me. The closer I got to the point where I needed to transition, if I was no longer a woman, I couldn't be the only woman in the room. In fact, it would turn that situation into a room full of men. I'm part of the problem. It almost felt like a betrayal, like it was wrong of me to not be proud of being a woman. Honestly, when the time came to transition, this was the last thing on my mind. These personal politics didn't seem so important at the time. But what I've realized is that I will always have those experiences from my childhood. I have a cis brother, and I've witnessed firsthand the way boys and girls are raised differently, treated differently, separated and categorized. I know where the boundaries are because when I wanted to do things that were for boys, I was discouraged. I've been in a male-dominated college classroom, and I've had my opinions dismissed. I've had my aptitude, skill, and physical ability dismissed. I have experienced misogyny. And here's the kicker. Because I do not pass as male, I will continue to experience misogyny. I must clarify that I don't mean this in a turfy way. I don't think I experience misogyny because I have a uterus. Trans women experience misogyny too, like we have a whole word for it. This is purely about optics and my own experiences of the way I'm treated based on how I look. But hopefully you see what I mean. Giving up womanhood in favor of a form of male privilege is hard. Maybe that's a contributing factor in leaning real into the trans pride thing, who's to say. A lot of the time we have to tell people we're trans just to get them talking about our gender from the right headspace in the first place. I'm gonna leave it there for now, but there's a lot more to talk about with regards to dating and sexuality, fashion, and masculinity itself. And those topics all deserve their own focus. For now, check out the videos that I left in the description, leave a comment if I've given you something to talk about, and I'll see you next time. By the way, my name's Dylan.